We have an active shooter.
Let's go ahead and declare this a mass casualty.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired at 4:15 at Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
active shooter mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Now to the school shooting in Perry, Iowa. Police saying multiple people were shot at the local high school early this morning on the students' first day back to class. Law enforcement sources telling ABC News the gunman is dead, and 2 victims were taken to the hospital.
The new year is a time for a fresh start, or a reset of sorts. While many adults are trying to determine how long they can carry out their New Year's resolutions, most children and young people are still enraptured with the newness of the toys, clothing, and electronics that they received for the holidays. The new year is rarely, if ever, associated with endings. Yet, for the students and faculty at Perry High School, their first day back to school of the brand new year, January 4th, 2024, marked the ending for some. Furthermore, that day was noted as the first school shooting of 2024, a distinction that no day wants and no one wants to give. Most students had just spent the previous 2 weeks at home with their families, celebrating the holidays and New Year's, and looking forward to the promise of the new year. Many were eager to return to school, while others, not so much. Still, there was a sense of excitement after returning from such a long hiatus, and students were busy catching up with friends about everything they did while on their break. They weren't prepared for the horrific violence that interrupted their morning and shattered their worlds. Today's case is dedicated to the lives and memories of the 6 injured survivors and the 2 deceased victims, Dan Marburger and Amir Joliffe.
Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety Pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as Dean. The shooting at the Perry High School is eerily similar to the shooting we covered in our last episode, 113, the CVPA school shooting. Both occurred first thing in the morning. A student and faculty member were killed in each shooting. The shooter was killed in each case. And in both cases, the shooter exhibited many red flags, either with their struggle with mental health issues, their alarming social media content, or both. Both may have been prevented. Perry High School, a part of the Perry Community School District, is located at 1200 18th Street in Perry, Iowa, which is approximately 30 miles from Des Moines. Perry is a small, young community of about 8,000 residents. Nearly 1,800 residents are students, attending K-12 in one of the Perry community schools. The middle school and high school share one building and are connected by a hallway that is situated right next to the cafeteria, which is where you'll find the largest number of students gathered at one time. It's also where the shooting occurred, that changed the lives of so many young people. People who may have been still holding on to the innocence of youth. Outside, the weather was cold at 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was overcast. Inside the school, it was bright and warm as the school cafeteria hosted a morning breakfast program for all middle and high school students. That morning, it was particularly busy as students were returning from the long holiday break and beginning the start of the second semester at school, which means starting new classes. The jazz band also practices in the cafeteria, and they were wrapping up practice and hustling out of the massive room, off to put away their instruments and get on with their day. Elsewhere, 17-year-old Dean was busy recording TikTok videos, seemingly from a bathroom within the high school. In the video, Dean can be seen facing directly into the camera in front of a blue duffel bag, and he captioned the video with the words,
"Now we wait."
The video was set to the track Stray Bullet, which is a song by a German rock band called KMFDM, which includes lyrics such as, quote, "I am your nightmare coming true. I am your worst enemy." Perhaps the first indication that something terrible loomed is that this song could also be found on the former website of one of the Columbine shooters. The first period bell hadn't rung yet, and while the cafeteria was busy, it wasn't quite as hectic in the school as it would be once the bell rang. Dean entered the cafeteria at 7:37 a.m., carrying a pump-action shotgun and a handgun. Without hesitation, he opened fire. 911 was called within the very same minute as the first bullet was fired. Students initially thought the gunshots were balloons popping or a book bag dropping.
I just heard a couple of bangs, not really gunshots. They're not very loud, and we saw a bunch of kids running, and we asked what happened because we were kind of concerned, but we thought it was just for band or something, just messing around. But then one of my girlfriend's friends said that it was a shooting, or that there was a shooter with a gun, and then we got scared. But again, we thought it was like a prank or something, like a lot of people think about that stuff these days. And that's when a bunch of cops started coming, and we knew it was serious. And when we were trying to leave, one of our teachers started screaming at us. And that's when we knew it was serious. He was telling us to leave. And that's when it got serious. And I just heard some of my friends got shot.
The mind doesn't initially suspect gunfire inside of the hallways of an educational institution. When the paralyzing realization dawns on you that you are under attack, fight, flight, or freeze kicks in. Such was the case for 15-year-old Xander Shelley, who was in the hallway outside of the cafeteria waiting for classes to start. He heard shots fired and started to run towards a nearby classroom. He was barely struck by the bullets that whizzed past, and he managed to make it into the classroom where he texted his father that there was a school shooter. Upon clearing the school, Xander was rushed to Iowa Methodist Medical Center, where he was treated for gunshot wounds. He was released the same day, physically intact, but emotionally he was a different person than the one who woke up that morning. He was a child no more. Several of the jazz band members were exiting the cafeteria when the gunfire started. Some ran outside to the football field and beyond. They ran until they couldn't run anymore, or until they felt far enough away from the danger inside the school. Back inside of the cafeteria, Principal Dan Marburger attempted to approach Dean. He desperately tried to reason with the student to drop the weapon. This heroic maneuver allowed many students the chance to escape, physically unharmed. Principal Marburger wasn't as fortunate. Dean shot the principal several times. He too was rushed to the hospital, but he passed away 10 days later, unable to overcome the extensive injuries he sustained. 56-year-old Dan Marburger was born on June 6, 1967 in Clinton, Iowa. Dan graduated from East Central Community High School in Miles, Iowa before heading off to college. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Central College in 1989. After college, Dan returned to East Central High School, where he taught computer skills and social studies, and he coached football, golf, and girls basketball. He even served as the athletic director for the school. While he was teaching, Dan went back to school to earn a Master's of Science degree in Educational Administration from Drake University. In 1995, Dan moved to Perry, Iowa, and was offered a job as the associate principal at the high school. In 1997, when he was only 30 years old, he was hired as the principal of Perry High, where he continued to serve up until the date of the shooting. Dan was proud to have implemented many academic programs into the school's program, and in 2007, he earned the honor of being named Iowa High School Athletic Directors Association Administrator of the Year. Dan was a passionate educator, but he equally loved traveling, especially with his family, who was his number one priority. He was known to enjoy an afternoon of reading, or golfing, or watching sports and grilling out with his family. The avid sports fan was a devoted Iowa Hawkeyes fan, but he also supported the Vikings and White Sox. Dan is survived by his beloved wife, Elizabeth, and their 5 children and 4 grandchildren. Moments after Dan was shot, Dean continued to fire into the cafeteria and adjacent hallway. 6th grader Amir Joliffe was struck by one of the errant bullets. The 11-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene, and his death has deeply impacted the community. Born in 2012 in Chicago, Illinois, Amir was vivacious. He was a lively young boy who wore a constant smile. So much so his nickname was Smiley. He loved life and was the first to stick up for another child if they were being bullied. Amir wanted others to get along, and he was happiest when on the move. His family says that Amir was never one to stand still, and always sought adventure. The youngster had a lot of hobbies and interests, including band, choir, soccer, and, like most kids his age, playing video games. Amir will be missed each and every day by his 4 siblings, parents, and so many others whom he touched. Police were on the scene by 7:45 a.m., but the school had already begun sheltering in place. When officers entered the school, they located Dean with a pump-action shotgun and small-caliber handgun. He was deceased, having died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The school was searched, and a homemade bomb was found. It was described as rudimentary and was safely disarmed. The FBI and ATF also responded to the scene and assisted in the subsequent investigation. Students were rescued from inside of the school and rounded up from nearby neighborhoods where they ran and sought shelter in area homes. There were over 150 officers on scene, and reunification centers were established at the Perry Lutheran Homes, the McCreary Community Building, and the National Guard Armory.
All units, Dallas County. We've got an active Sears activation at Perry High School. Active Sears activation at Perry High School. It's going to be in reference to a possible gunshots at Perry High School. Start that way.
Dallas 1 direct, you have access to the cameras.
We're getting pulled up now. We got somebody down in the hallway. Copy. We see something on the west hallway. What channel am I switching to? There's blood on.
Male subject down in the hallway. Appears to be self-inflicted gunshot wound. Unsure on other victims. Dallas subject that's down is deceased.
Copy. Subject down, deceased. Yeah, location?
We are outside of room 308.
We're going to need multiple ambulances, so we're going to need both other EMS units headed that way as well.
Do we have a number of victims? Or an estimated number of victims?
Copy. We're getting multiple reports.
Dallas 593. Let's go ahead and put both the helicopters en route. Also, let's get Perry Fire there so that we can have landing zone and we can start triage.
Patients in our ambulance. Can you reserve a helicopter for me?
How many patients do we have on scene?
Unknown at this time. We have 2 in our truck. Reports of multiple inside.
Dallas, has Polk County been advised to advise all the hospitals of a possible mass casualty incident?
Copy. We're calling them now.
Middle school has been cleared. Officers are doing a secondary sweep.
That's what we've got triage area. Currently, he's advising no other incoming units need to come into the school right now.
I am in Command of EMS transport. We believe that we have our most critical out.
Dean was born on October 11th, 2006, in Des Moines, Iowa. The first 10 years of his life were spent living in Jamaica, and while living there, he had a younger sister who was born in 2011. Dean enjoyed living in Jamaica and loved taking fishing trips to the sandbar. The family eventually moved to Perry, Iowa, where Dean's father was the manager at the Perry Municipal Airport after working as the public works director for the city of Perry. Dean's mother owned her own business, though the specific type of business is unknown. She also served on the city development board, and overall, their family was very involved with their community. Dean, a senior at Perry High School, was described as private and kept to himself. Some reports indicate that he was the target of bullying and had been for much of the time he was in school in Iowa. Dean spent a substantial amount of time online, and he used his social media presence to discuss his obsession with different serial killers, including Jeffrey Dahmer. He posted photos of himself posing with firearms, and his entire social media presence was a depiction of a mass shooter in the making. Dean wasn't close with many people, but he did have two friends, who both say he just became tired of being bullied all the time. He hated going to school and being tormented, but he mostly just dealt with it. After he learned that his little sister was starting to get bullied too, Dean snapped. He was one thing, but he'd be damned if his sister was going to live with the same harassment he did. His friends say that Dean was actually the nicest kid, and they really didn't understand why he was singled out so much. There was a number of concerning posts on Dean's social media, specifically his TikTok. In one video, Dean was seen mimicking, quote, the cook from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, while yet another clip showed Dean pointing a stick at a friend while pretending it was a gun. He referred to himself as a stoner in at least one video, and multiple photos showed Dean with various firearms. He had over 250 followers on TikTok before it was eventually taken down. Dean's most frequently used social media app, however, was called Discord, which is really more of a messaging platform. A number of the messages were recovered, and one such message indicated that he was at school and, quote,
ready for what's to come.
About 10 minutes after that message, another one was posted saying, quote,
I'm fucking nervous. I'm in the bathroom gearing up.
Dean continued using a racial slur and writing, quote,
I need him to leave so I can assemble my guns.
It was also discovered that Dean belonged to a chat group on Discord called School Massacres Discussion, and the group was meant for exactly what it was named. The entire premise is completely disturbing, and indeed, at least one other Discord user thought so as well, as they reportedly flagged the chat group to the FBI the November before the shooting. Whatever happened with that report is unknown, but this user most definitely did the right thing in reporting it. These are precisely the types of posts, groups, or content. These are precisely the types of posts, groups, or content that should be reported to authorities anytime you see it. Perhaps if this tip was thoroughly acted upon immediately, we wouldn't be reporting on this case. For their part, Discord released a statement saying the following, quote, our deepest sympathies are with the victims, their families, and the community in Perry, Iowa following yesterday's horrific shooting. Discord has a zero-tolerance policy against content that glorifies violence and violent extremism, which is reflected in our community guidelines. We took immediate action against the suspect and his content, and are currently cooperating with law enforcement to assist them in their continuing investigation. The shooter's parents were horrified to learn that their son was capable of committing such violence. They had no idea he was planning such a terrible attack, and, in fact, they had been discussing future plans with him, never imagining he intended anything but a bright and productive future. A memorial was held at a local park on the same day as the shooting, and a number of GoFundMe accounts were established for the families of the deceased and injured. The governor ordered all flags to be lowered half-staff. We all have the unique ability to help prevent such a catastrophic event from happening if we keep our eyes and ears open, and never hesitate to report when something or someone just doesn't seem right. With the delicate balance of mental health reform, education, active shooter training, and common sense gun laws, we may one day realize the dream. The dream that there will be no more active shootings. We pray that love will prevail over hate.
Too many have died! We should say to ourselves, not one more!
In the meantime, we urge our listeners to stay aware of your surroundings and keep in touch with your loved ones. If you see something, say something. You never know how many lives you'll be saving. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving. A big thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the songs on our show. You can find him online at www.darrencurtismusic.com. Make sure to check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Active Shooter, the podcast, and on Twitter at Podcast Active. Thank you, and be safe.